everybody, and welcome to today's episode of This Organized Life podcast. I'm your host, Lori Palau, and happy September, everybody. We are back into the swing of things. We are talking all about back to school and meal planning and all of those great things that we love. And to kick this month off, I figured we better bring on a heavy hitter in the productivity space to encourage us, to inspire us, to empower us, because I know that one of the things I love about my job is I get to learn from other people that are doing sort of similar things, but have their own unique spin. So I'm always learning something. So we've had, if you've been a longtime listener of our show, you know that we've had different types of productivity experts and guests on, and everybody's kind of got their own unique style and spin. And I take nuggets of information from each and every one of them. And today's guest is no exception. So joining me today is Sarah Dalton. And Sarah is the founder of Your Simply Big Life. She's a podcast host as well. I was a guest on her show not too long ago. She has an online community where she helps mentor and encourage other women. She's got a productivity planner. She's got all of these things. And when I was talking to her several months ago, I said, I have to have you on our show to share kind of your journey, your story, and your approach to productivity and organizing with our community. So I figured now that we're kind of putting that, we're switching our hats from that summer, taking the time off to kind of starting to get into some new routines. This would be a great time to bring Sarah on and let her share her messaging with you. So without further ado, let me welcome my friend, Sarah Dalton, to the show. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Lori. I am super excited. First of all, I just want to say this is a little bit of a surreal moment because it's the full circle feeling of listening to your podcast forever, like I told you when you came on my show. And now getting to chat with you and be a guest is really an honor. So I'm really excited to chat with you and really connect with your community. So yeah, I am the founder, like you said, of Your Simply Big Life. It started actually as a Simply Big Life. And that's kind of the thing I love about entrepreneurship and just my journey in all these things with personal development, my understanding of productivity and all the things that it's an always evolving, that it's just as we know, it's life is a journey and all these things along the way. We're figuring them out. We're learning different ways, right, to manage all the things. And so I'm just really excited to chat about this because this is the perfect time heading into the school year. Yeah, this is everybody. I know I am, right? I've got my two kiddos and we need to switch to these seasonal rhythms and get in the flow.
Totally. Yeah. So tell us how old, just to kind of give our listeners a little bit of a context. So how old are your kids? Where do you hail from? All the fun things.
Yes. So I'm in the Midwest in Chicago where I actually grew up, like in the same town that I grew up. My kids are,
Oh,
it's kind of crazy because it wasn't necessarily the plan, but that's how it happened. So we love our little community. And I have a 7 and a 9-year-old. And then I'm a stepmom as well. So I have two older stepsons. So we've kind of got the full gamut going on. And yeah, so it really, I mean, a big part of my story and kind of where Your Simply Big Life came from was when I was a new mom and a new wife, and diving right into motherhood as a stepmom, right? That was a big thing.
yeah. Can you talk a little? I mean, and I know I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like, because
Yeah.
we didn't really plan to necessarily talk about that. But I think if you're open to it, just to
Yeah.
kind of give a little bit of context to that, because, well, especially when it comes to productivity, a lot of
Yeah.
times we are setting plans in motion. And that is something like motherhood. I don't want to say we ease into it, but like you're on your own terms. And then this
Mm,
was different. Like this is a different scenario. And I've
mhm.
never really talked about that on the
Yeah.
show. And maybe you
Yep.
could just kind of speak a little bit into that.
So it's so interesting that this came up because it's not necessarily something I talk about often, but I actually just put it in my notes that I want to start talking about it more because it is obviously, it's a big part of my story. And I think where it connects to that productivity, that's exactly right. You hit it on the head of like, typically, right? You get married, you have 9 months when you get pregnant, or even you have time in your marriage to sort of like be married for, not everybody, but if the planners out there, right, where you have that time, we didn't have any of that time, right? We didn't have just the two of us, which I'm real, even just that piece, right, of really being a wife. I didn't necessarily have that piece to focus on. So now as we're pulling back the layers, as the kids are getting older, we're like, okay, right? Like our marriage, and speaking of priorities and productivity, that's a priority. And not that it wasn't, but it was a lot going on, obviously. So, and then diving into, they were 8 and 5. So they are the sweetest boys. Like I got super lucky and blessed with them. And just even that, right? I was basically thrown into this situation where, I felt a lot of times it was that overwhelm, and I felt like I had always wanted to be a mom. That was the other piece of it. And I had an idea in my head of how it was going to look, of how I was going to show up as a mom, that I was going to have it all together, that I was going to cook all the things and do all the things. And I think it was almost an immediate feeling of overwhelm and frustration because it didn't look how I thought it was supposed to look. And I think even, right, I mean, that was, I think, amplified because I had the two boys right away, and we were right away doing like the school pickup and like all the things that moms of the older kids deal with school age, right? And it was like, I skipped obviously I didn't have any of those baby stages with them. So it was very interesting. And then not too long after I got pregnant with my first son. So it was just, it felt like one thing after the other. And that it was a lot. I think a big piece of the beginning of my story was just that I felt that lack of control and that lack of, like it wasn't fitting with what I thought it was going to look like. And I didn't know where to start getting back that control, that feeling of like, what do I do?
Well, and I think that's a really interesting point. And thank you for sharing that, because I have so many thoughts just about this, right?
Yeah.
Like on like the fact that, again, you were learning, because we all have to learn,
Mhm.
learning to be a wife, learning to cohabitate, learning to share all these things, learning other people's habits, learning all of that, and learning to mother.
Yeah.
Yet you're not fully mothering again. And I don't
Yeah.
need to, I'm not looking to pry into personal things,
Yeah.
but there's also a different dynamic between being a birth mom with full
Absolutely.
parental freedom
Mm.
and being a step mom and having other
Yep.
boundaries in place. So
Yep.
there's that whole, like, all of a sudden, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And for somebody that, as that is a planner, a rule follower, somebody that kind of has now at least created a business. I'm curious to know if this is always the way that you were. But again, productivity comes from being proactive in design in
Mhm.
advance. Being productive doesn't just happen. And I say that to
Yes.
people all the time.
Yes.
So this probably threw you on its axis. And I don't know if that was the catalyst for your
Mhm.
Simply Big life, or kind of maybe it kind of explained how that
Exactly.
blossomed.
Exactly. It was now looking back, right? In hindsight, I can see absolutely that it was this feeling for the first time in my life that, first of all, I wasn't just making choices for myself. And I mean, that was probably the biggest thing. And my choices, the things that I did every day, they affected those around me. And I was responsible for other people. Like coming out, literally, I was like, I'm in my late 20s and kind of in this situation. So I think it took some time, and there was in that, it was the messy years of trying to figure it out, trying to navigate all of it. But absolutely. So I've always loved planners. I've always loved the idea of things having their place and being organized. But in that, at that point, I was literally trying a different planner every I was looking for the perfect planner, like the one that would help me figure it all out, right? Like the magic bullet, which I now know is not a thing. And it's all these things they're just tools that can help us on our journey. But so I think at that point, where I started, I hired a coach, first of all, just a life coach to and just to get my mind right. A big piece of my journey was just my personal development, taking care of myself and kind of wrapping my brain around where I was in this new season of my life. And then from there, I was able to sort of pull the lens back a lot easier and see, okay, so, and we can talk about that, but that's sort of where the method came from, right? Where it's like, okay, what are the important things? What are the priorities? How do I literally design my days and my weeks around those things?
So does that tie into what you call your core values? Because I want you to talk about
Yes.
that. And because I found that to be very interesting.
Mhm.
And I always say that how we do anything, how we spend our time, how we spend our money, what we do is really a reflection on what we value. And I don't mean that as from a judgmental standpoint. Like I know that if, for me, I'll invest money on household stuff and organizing
Right.
products because that's important to me. My sister-in-law will go out and spend money on clothes and things because and I don't mean in a judgy way, but like that's very
Totally.
important to her. And so like she wouldn't spend money on the things that I would because they're not her like on her values list. They're like lower
Yes.
on priority. Where for me, I'll like walk around like a homeless person. I don't
Right.
care, but I feel better when my house is organized. So that's
Yes.
where so
Mhm.
always think, whenever anybody has a business or some sort of, product that has a values based
Mhm.
component, I'm just always interested in kind of learning a little bit more about how that created, what that looks like, and what they are. So
Oh
maybe you
my
can just kind
gosh.
of break that all down for everybody.
Absolutely. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about because it is the thing that I built my business around. And it started with, like I said, with that coach that I hired. That was one of the first things she had me do, was get clear on my personal core values. And
Mm.
I couldn't tell you, like, I think that's the thing too, is I think when we say it's something that people talk about and people generally think they know what their values are, and maybe they do, right? Absolutely, like a lot of people do, but I think it's this, for me, I couldn't have told you, because I was so like, there I was all over the place. I couldn't have named it. And for me, doing that exercise was really kind of what got the ball rolling for me and got that motivation, because it was eye opening, and it was really encouraging to see, like, this is who I am and that's okay. And what, I know you love the Enneagram too. So this is just another, it's sort of another, the way that I look at core values, it's what we believe to be the most important things in our lives. Like at the top tier level, what are our priorities? What are we going to design our life around? And it's kind of that perspective through which we see the world, right? And then, so what I like to say is it's my foundation, like what I built it on. And then also it's the filter. It's my filter as I'm making decisions, as I'm planning out my week, planning out my month. I'm filtering it through my core values. And I know that that can sound great, like, okay. But I have like so many strategies too, to like how to practically put that into place. So I think for me, I'll just sort of run you through
Yeah,
the process.
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. So, and I have a link too. I think I gave that to you, like a
Yep.
freebie that they can, because that worksheets, I mean, I'm all about writing things down and working it out, getting it out of your head. So, first, naming, and that's the big naming what your top 5 core values are. And again, the number, I'm big on finding what works for you. So, taking people's frameworks, taking people's advice and playing around with it. So, if 3 feels better for you, if 7, right? Like the number is basically irrelevant, but something you want to be able to like, not too many, right? You want to be able to remember, you want to keep it simple because that's what I'm all about too. So for me, it's top 5 core values. For my core values are, so naming them: faith, family, freedom, health, integrity. Those are my top 5 core values. And so basically, there's so many different, like you can Google it and there's massive amounts of words, like lists, upon lists of just words or phrases of core values, of
That's what I was going
examples.
to ask you. Like, do you offer up
Yep.
prompts to people? Because
Yep.
people be like,
I know. Where do
I
you
don't
start?
know. Right. Where do
Yes.
you start? Yeah.
And that's in that activity as well, like in the worksheet, all the different words. So Atomic Habits, James Clear has if you Google that, he has like the list. I think that's the thing of finding, and they're pretty much the same, right? Some of them are like, it could be like 100 words. And that's where, again, it can, even starting that big could be overwhelming. But it's where going through this process for me, I just like to set a timer because I'm all just keeping, not letting it get complicated. Like it ultimately too, I believe that we know, like in our gut, we know what our core values are. It's just sort of bringing them to the surface and clarifying them. So, and that's the next piece of it. But so going through the words and just seeing what resonates with you first, like what stands out, what, rings, like is like, ooh, like spark something, circling that. So when I first did it, I probably circled like 20 words and then go back through it and then highlight or underline from there, because a lot of them you'll find will overlap and they might have, right, this similar like adventure and freedom, like the two similar values. But for me, and then even simplicity, this is a good example, like simplicity, adventure, freedom. For me, freedom encompasses all of those things.
Well,
And
I always say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
yeah, no,
interrupt
you're
you.
good. Yeah.
I always say, and I have my pen in my hand because I'm like taking down
I love
notes. I'm
it.
like, I always say that for me, organization is freedom.
Yes, yes,
Where
yes.
I know some people will look at organization or routine as restriction, and I see it as the complete opposite.
Yeah.
And it, to me, having that, knowing where things
Mhm.
things are, so I don't have to run around,
Yeah.
or knowing what's coming next, again, with whatever's in our control, like we
Yeah.
said,
Right.
but having that preparation or whatever, that gives me freedom
Yep.
to then enjoy or then do this. And
100%.
so
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, I
Yeah.
interrupted you. Go
No,
ahead.
I totally agree. That's why I love you so much. Like I totally am on the same page with that. That really opens up when we have that structure and it gives us that capability to be free, to do the things we want to do. So yeah. So I think, again, I think that's probably the part where, depending your personality, right? Like you could overthink it. I would just encourage the people, like, and it could be like, go to it one day, go through it, and then take a break, like step back from it, and then maybe come back to it the next day. Like when you're in a clearer headspace, just let it be slow, let it evolve, but eventually you're going to come up with your 5 core values, right? And then from there, so that's naming, and then you're going to define. And I think this is where a lot of people just maybe stop at that point, where, and then they think, okay, well, I'm good, like, so I know my core values. But I think this is for me where I bring it into the strategy and the tangible ways of like, well, what does that mean? And when people say living in alignment, right, that's a big thing for me. That's when I find that flow and that alignment. That's what I'm talking about, is alignment with my values. So defining, that next step would be defining. So when you have your word, like for me, I kind of went through, and like health is one of my values. So health probably means something different to everybody, right? If we really get granular about it and we get clear, like clear for ourselves, what does that mean? Does that mean more energy? Does that mean the capacity to do? For me, health is just really, it's that holistic, it's the physical, mental, spiritual, it's having the capacity to really do all the things I love and to have room in my life for the priorities that, and the things and the people that are important to me. So if I'm not healthy, I can't do those things. And then, so it's defining it. And so that could be words, sentences. So much of what I do, what I encourage women to do is just brainstorm, brain dump, mind map, whatever
Mhm.
you want to call it, right? Get out a piece of paper and pen and just start writing, because we keep so much of that too, as you know, the mental load that we're keeping up in our head. So getting that out, the ideas will start flowing. So that, as far as, again, defining what that means for you, and then aligning. So that next step would be, so name, define, align. And so what, now that you're clear on what that means to you, what does that look like on a daily basis? When you're in alignment with that value, how are you going to show up? So what do your habits look like? What do your rhythms look like? What is that actually, how will that affect your day? When I'm living in alignment with my value of health, that's me moving my body. That's me having my grounding time in the morning, sitting, reading my Bible, writing in my journal, whatever that is for you. I've just found those 3 steps to sort of bring it full circle and take it deeper than just sort of like knowing what your values are.
I love it. I love it so much because it's, you know, it's like going deeper than just goals. It's going
Yes.
deeper than just putting something down there. And again, it's really kind of dissecting
Mhm.
your why for doing things and bringing it back to when you are feeling out of alignment, right? We all go
Yeah.
through things where we're running a million miles an hour or something goes awry and you start to like lose sight of things. I would think if you come back to this and you use that as like kind of your centering of like, let me go
Mhm.
back, is where does what situation is or where does X
Mm.
fit into my core values? And I
Exactly.
guarantee you that it might not, like that thing that's causing you stress. And that could be from a mental clutter, it could be
Mm.
physical thing, it could be something. And sometimes that's going to be in our control and sometimes it's going to be out of our control. But then how do we, if it's something that's out of our control that we don't really like, here's our situation, you can then probably, I would assume, say, okay, well, what steps do we need to take to get us back on track?
Totally. Yes. And I love that you brought that up, because I think, right, that's probably maybe that the biggest struggle or the biggest piece of it is that, of course, we're not going to always be in alignment. So
Mhm.
the filter, the foundation, and also that sort of that like guardrail that's like telling us like, ooh, getting a little close. Like if you're thinking if you're on a road, right? Like you're getting a little close to the edge. Like, okay, let's just realign. And that's why I love to look at everything in seasons and just our life in seasons. So every season I like to do a seasonal refresh where I'm reevaluating my values
Mhm.
and my vision and my goals, and just again it's sort of like editing, which I know you love, right? Editing the things that aren't in alignment. And I think that's the thing too, like you said, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be like always like, okay, I got this out of my life, so I should be back in alignment. But it's this flow of like, okay, slowly adding things in, taking things out, playing around with it, and finding your alignment, your version of that.
And I just can't help but think because a lot of the people that are in my world and a lot of the people that are in this community, not only does this hold true in your personal life, but professionally, I've
Mhm.
got a lot, not all, but I've got a lot of people who are entrepreneurs
Mhm.
or they are volunteers and things. So they're maybe not working like in corporate America. We do have a bunch of people, but a lot of people we have. And I think it's interesting because when we get into entrepreneurship, and you know this, we get into it because we're passionate about something. And it probably either consciously or unconsciously aligns with our core values when
Mhm.
we start it, right? Because we're starting it because we were passionate about it. And but then as it starts to grow and scale, sometimes it takes on a life of its own. And it's easy for us to start to shift our priorities to focus in on the wrong things.
Yeah.
Whether we're comparing ourselves to social media or we're chasing what our financials. And again, if you're running a business, obviously there's going to be that part of it that's going to play in. But we start focusing in on the wrong metrics.
Mhm. Yes.
And I love this, and I'm gonna I want to talk to you about it more because I want to kind of like use this for my
Mhm.
retreat in November
Yeah.
with my people to bring them back
Mhm.
and myself to what are your core values as you grow, as your kids grow, as your life grows, as you go through different seasons.
Mhm.
What are your core values and what are the things that you're putting into your life, just like
Mhm.
stuff, the physical
Yep.
stuff? What are the things that you're incorporating that are in alignment and the ones that aren't, how can we purge those or
Yes.
delegate them?
Yes. I love it. The thing that makes me think of is, especially with entrepreneurship, right? I think for me, as I said, freedom is a core value. And when I start, and I'm still fairly, I'm like on the smaller end, getting started, getting things going. But I'm being very intentional because I know that intentional about my vision for my business and not perfect, obviously, like, but so that means, and that freedom piece, right? That having to do with like, how many hours am I working, especially in the summer, right? Each season, like reevaluating, am I really representing that value of freedom if I'm feeling chained to my computer or my phone, right? So it's just, I absolutely, it fits. That's the beauty of core values, is that it literally, like, they're your roadmap for life.
Yeah, no, I love it. And so I'm just looking at some of the notes that I had taken because I feel like
Yeah,
we've addressed a lot, we've brought in new ones.
so good.
So I think what kind of just tying it back from our organ, like the stuff that I teach in terms of the three types of clutter. I think you can really you can apply your values, your core values to the physical clutter, to your emotional clutter, and to your calendar clutter. And you can look at them. So for anybody that's listening out there that is going, where can I start? And obviously we're gonna,
Mhm.
after the break, I want to talk about like your actual product and the courses and things like that. But if you are writing down your core values and then you're struggling with physical clutter, look at some of the things that are getting in your way, the stuff, I'm
Mhm.
air quoting, that's in
Yeah.
your way, and say, where does that connect up? And if it doesn't, maybe said thing doesn't have a place.
Mhm.
Maybe that's something that would be an indicator. And again, you
Absolutely.
can go through that exercise with,
Mhm.
again, specifically with calendar clutter, which is something that I struggle with. I know a lot of moms
Yeah.
do, or a lot of people do, which is being overscheduled and
Mhm.
knowing, am I doing things for the wrong reasons? Or maybe, like you said, maybe this is something I want to do, but maybe this isn't the season for me to be doing it.
Mhm.
Maybe I just need to hit the pause button and bring this in or reintroduce this at a later date. And that's something that I've had to learn and continue to learn. But that's something I've learned the hard way, let's
Yeah.
just say.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So the thing sort of that I bring it back to, the method that comes from this, and I know we can dive more into it, but it's
Yeah.
just basically becoming the CEO of your time and your energy. That's the other piece of, for me, I'm big on the time, yes, the time management, but it's the energy. So really the way that I define productivity, it's matching up your time and your energy with your top priorities. So really making sure, and really it's anything that's moving you closer to your vision and your goals, which come out of your core values. So it's this flow, it's this like big picture vision from your values that literally trickles down and affects the habits that you're doing every single day. So the CEO is you're clarifying your values and your vision and your goals, like just clarifying, and that's ultimately your priorities. And then the E is editing. And so, like, exactly like you do, like you say, I mean, you got to start there. So once you're clear, then you, as much as possible, right? Delete, delegate anything that does not align, and then organize. The O is organize. So that's the systems, the habits, all those things. So it's like, for me, it's that empowerment. You're becoming the CEO. You're taking back the choice, the power, the intention, and it's in our hands. Whatever we can do have control over, we can.
And I love it. And that's the thing. And that's the beauty of it, is you're not going to be able to control a lot.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
let's be honest.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we can be proactive and
Proactive. Yeah.
we can be proactive in saying, you know, these are the things we know things are going to go sideways at some
Mhm.
point. It's just a matter of when, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So what can we do
totally.
now to get us in a place that when things go
Yeah.
sideways, we're grounded?
Yeah, feeling like you have the tools. You're prepared
Yeah,
when the overwhelm hits, when the chaos comes, because it will. You have the tools and the frameworks. Yeah.
I love it. We're
Mhm.
going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we want to like dive a little bit deeper. I want to talk about some of like if people want to get started, where do they go? And just a whole bunch of other stuff. So sit tight. We'll be right back. So I'm like super pumped for all this because I mean, I'm learning a lot. Like I said, I want to start applying this with some of the people who I mentor
Mhm.
and encourage because I think it's so valuable.
Yeah.
So talk about some of the practical things. So how do we get involved in doing what you do? So I know you have courses, I know you have an actual planner. Walk us through when someone goes to your website, what do they find?
Yeah, so I would start, like we said, with that the download. It's basically like a 3-sheet worksheet to figure out your core values because that's the number one. And then yes, like you said, the thing that I started the business around was the planner. And so this year, so it's the peace and productivity planner. And ultimately, like I said, for me, it was I couldn't find the planner that I wanted to use. So I just started designing one. I just started creating, I started sketching in my notebook, and one thing led to another. I was like, yeah, let's just give this a try. So this is in 2022 will be my 4th year of publishing my planner, and it's been that's a whole episode in itself because it's been a crazy ride, um but amazing. And the really my favorite thing about it is that basically what it is it's bringing the method, the framework, this idea of getting like building your life around what's most important. It's that in a planner. Like that was the mission, that was the goal. And that's, I think, what was missing. That was what was missing when I was just finding all these that were all about the schedule, right? Which is great
Yes.
because we need that. But we also need sort of that guidance of like, okay, but what am I scheduling and what's on the to do list? Because if it's just the random things that we all need to do every day, every week, that's where that overwhelm, that feeling. The biggest thing was I want from the planner, I want women to feel like at the end of the day, they lay their head on their pillow and they're like, yes, I got these top 3 things done. Really my day was complete. It was productive, whether their focus was rest, whether their focus was work or whatever that was, but it was aligned with and they had set that intention. So I think that's why planners and physical planners for me are so important because again, we get it out of our brain, we get it onto the paper, we can see what our intentions are, and then we have a way to look back and review and say at the end of the day, okay, so I set these intentions, I had these top 3, essential tasks. How did that go? How did that feel? So then for the next day, you can really set yourself up for success in applying, reapplying what worked and moving on from what didn't, instead of beating ourselves up and keep going and going and going and trying to do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I talk a lot about the busy versus the productive. And
Yep.
a lot of us are, I think everyone could raise their hand and go, I'm busy, and we work and we work and we work
Yeah.
for like a week of vacation or whatever it
Hmm.
is, or a weekend or
Yeah.
whatever. But we're so busy,
Hmm.
and busy is tiresome. At least that's how
Yeah.
I define it. Like when you're
Same.
and I've been trying to be more intentional about not using that word. And it's hard because you're so used to saying it.
Yeah.
But when you're productive, when you're doing things that are productive, it's recharging. Not that it's still not exhausting and
Hmm.
work, but there's that reward that like you've checked something productive off of your to-do list. You've
Yes.
moved that needle closer as opposed
Yes.
to just busy where you're in that hamster wheel. At least in my
Absolutely.
mind, that's how I kind of look at the two.
Yep.
And I like the fact of giving you that reference point to kind of always come back to,
Hmm.
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And my big thing with that, with the planner and basically the course, I can tell you a little about that too,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
it's
please.
just sort of like it's the online version. It's sort of like the coaching method of the planner. Like I took the planner and how I would walk somebody through it if I was like holding their hand and how I've used it. And I've put it into this course where it's kind of basically what we've been talking about. It's just super simple and like it's the mindset, it's the core values, it walks you through in video and audio, just these different modules. There's a workbook to go with it, but we talk about, then we break down the time management, the energy management, and how you can, again, literally go from, okay, here are my values to what am I doing today? So that's basically the course. And then they really do, they go together. Like that was the plan, that was the idea. And I'm just really excited, to get this planner, especially I'm really excited about the next one. Like every year it just gets, it really comes, well, I say it gets better and better because it's this feedback from the community. It's the feedback from the women who are using it. And that's the thing that lights me up because it's the planner lovers, right? The planner lovers out there who are like, okay, I want a little more of this, a little less of this. And I've just allowed it to, evolve, but it always keeps that foundational flow of get the big picture and break it down so that it's not overwhelming. And then at the end of the day, you are just naturally in alignment.
I love it. I love it. It's so great. So I'm curious. So were you always organized? Like talk about like what was little Sarah like?
Yeah. You know what's funny? Okay, so this is what I realized. And even after talking to you on my podcast about the Enneagram and things, so I'm a 7. And I think what for me it was, I always was redoing my room. I was always reorganizing things. My room was always clean. But there were things that I didn't necessarily care if they were like planned or organized. Like I was fly by the seat of my pants in some ways. And then in other ways, like certain things. And so it was almost like I can't tell you why certain things were really important to me that I keep, so my room was picked up, like I said. And then even as like a 20 something, when I was living by myself, I would always like reorganize the drawers. And I find, like literally, and nobody else is living there and nobody's moving anything, but I'm always like, it's almost like it was a form of like therapy for me. And I would get rid of stuff and I like to purge and get rid of things, but then I also like to bring things in.
Well, that's I was going to say, but it's good that you had that because the 7s, again, for any people out there that aren't Enneagram enthusiasts, the 7 is the enthusiast, and very future oriented. So, which is, the orientation to time of a 7 is the future, which would totally align with a planner because you are again planning for the future, the vision, and 7s get energy from the anticipation of what's to come a lot of time. And the anticipation is really exciting for the 7. And so everything that you're saying tends to kind of support all of that. I love it.
Awesome.
So
that's cool.
It's great. Now, what about talk a little bit about your life now. So when, I know you got married, immediate blended family or, stepkids, then you had your own. And so now here you are, fast forward, 4 kids, career, all the things. Give us a snapshot into what your life is like now.
Yeah. So it's it's interesting because my kids actually have been in-person school. Like we got really lucky during this year.
Lucky.
I know, so lucky. I'm so blessed. Like in that way, I feel like, I did have, it was like a half day, but I did have time. And that's when I would have my office hours, basically. When they would be in school, that's when I would do, the podcast and all these things. It's an ever evolving, again, like process, but I will say our home, like our actual home, I cannot stand clutter. I cannot stand, like more so than ever than like now with kids. And I mean, it's very, everything does have its place. It does have, so it's funny. You can see behind me, these are my books. This is my section.
Yes.
If I turned the camera, which I won't, because that's my husband's side. Right. So it's like, obviously everything's not perfect, but I do like everything in its place. And to that extent, so I've been spending, I'm always reorganizing, I'm always decluttering. I love doing that. I love talking about it. I still am working on not bringing as many things in. Like there's all the similar things, but the big thing we do as far as just teamwork as a family, that's something we're really working on as far as like our rhythms and our flow, we hit the morning routine for the kids really hard. And I'm learning, as we kind of know and are starting to understand with habits and how they work, like to not overwhelm them, to not try to do all the things, because we really need to keep working towards them helping out with chores and things like that. What we do have going on that's going well as far as like we do like a coffee chat with my husband every week. This is our goal, like doesn't always happen, where we're planning the week, right? Where like I do my own weekly refresh where I'm planning the week. Then we sit down and we do a coffee chat where we're looking over the schedule and the week. So me and him are on the same page.
My
And then,
gosh.
and it's
That's
not
so
perfect.
good. Oh my
Like I
gosh, it's
said,
so
it's not
good.
perfect, but then a family meeting. So it goes for me, it's like me getting clear in my head what's going on, me and him being on the same page, and then the kids being on the same page. So, and this is where even for the new season, right? For going, into school, that's huge. Like as we said at the beginning, like getting the new rhythms down, I think that communication piece is like number one,
Just wrote it. Just
right?
wrote it right there.
Communication. Yes, we got to be on the
Because
same page.
it's so true.
Yeah.
And I love that what you said, because again, so many times we're clear on what we
Yes.
want.
Oh, yes.
We're clear on what we're doing. But if we don't loop our spouse in, or maybe even you and your spouse do it, but you don't loop
Right.
the kids in, the expectation isn't there. You don't have that communication. So that
Totally.
communication piece is so critical.
Oh my
I
gosh,
love
yes.
that. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And I think that's the thing where of course, we need to keep working, but at least knowing the goal, like knowing that vision of like, we want to sit down and we're figuring out for the kids, like calling it a family meeting, I swear makes their brain flip a switch and be like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to like
Oh,
sit
my
down.
kids would be like, "Who died?" If I
Yes.
said that, my kids would be like, "Who died? Are you getting divorced?" That would
Yeah.
be what would
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
And like calling ourselves like Team Dalton or these things I've heard. I'm like,
Yes.
"Oh, that
Yes.
sounds great. Like I'm going to try that." My kids are like, "Yeah, no, mom. Absolutely not. Like that's so dumb." I'm like, "But we found like in the car, if we're like, okay, for like focused conversation, like this is what's going on this week, like in where it's like a less structured environment for them."
Yes.
So it's just interesting, I think, but that's for me the centerpiece of if it's going to be a good week, if we're all on the same page, and then working through the morning routines, like always tweaking, like the older they get, of course, the more responsibility, the more independent they can get. And the morning and evening routines, I feel like, are the biggies, because that just, especially for the school year, because obviously they got to go to bed, they got to get their sleep, all that. So
Well, and my biggest takeaway, and I think this is like kind of a good way to kind of tie things in a little bit, is the reality is, as they grow, as life evolves, the tactical day-to-day stuff is going to change, but your core values are your core values.
totally.
And that is, it's just, how do they show up? What does that look like? And it's gonna, your activity might look different when your kids are 5 versus
Yes.
when they're 15, but the why behind it is still going to be the same. And I think that, to
100%.
me, that's my takeaway. I don't know if
Yes.
that's everyone's takeaway,
Yes.
but that's how I feel. And that's why I love what you're doing. Before we go to break, because again, I could talk to you for hours and hours, but I want to give people the direction of where to find you, how to learn more. Obviously, we're going to put the links to everything in our show notes, including the free download. But where do they go?
Yes, thank you. So just yoursimplybig.life.com. And then I'm on Instagram at your_simply_big_life. So those are the two main places. I've been really trying to simplify and pare down and really show up the best I can, especially in Instagram, because I'm really enjoying reels.
Awesome. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. That's, yeah. My social media coordinator's like, you need to do more reels. I'm like, oh, really? Don't I do enough?
They're kind of fun.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to just do our wrap up questions. So sit tight. All right, Sarah, this has been awesome. I'm really, really excited. I hope everybody that's listening is super pumped to kind of take this on as we enter this season of back to school, newness, recharging, all of the things, and kind of get your core values aligned. And whether you're a paper planner, you're a digital planner, just getting this information out there, I think it's so key. So thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
So obviously you've inspired us. And so I always like to throw it back on our guests and ask you, what book in your life has been inspirational to you? Something that was a game changer. It could be something from years ago. It could be something current. Just let us know. Give us a sneak peek.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, three books came to mind,
Go
but
for it.
okay. Okay.
I mean,
I'm
if
like,
you want, it's fine. You can.
which is funny what they're named. And I'm like, so the one thing, the one thing, essentialism and atomic habits. And
Okay.
it's so, I mean, those, because they basically all, right, they remind me to keep it simple, to stay focused, to prioritize what matters. I mean, and atomic habits was more the, like the practical and like breaking it down into the habits. So, but the one thing and essentialism sort of in that same vein. So, yeah.
I have to read the one thing. I 9 times out of 10 will go out and buy the book if
Yeah.
after our guest. Like, I love Essentialism. It's been a popular fave.
Mm,
Greg McCowan's awesome. I think it's
yeah.
such a valuable book for people. And
Mm,
I've read some stuff from Atomic Habits. I don't think I've read it cover to cover, but have not read the one thing. So
yeah.
I'll just put that on my reading list. That's
Yeah, it's
awesome.
one that like I'm going to go back to, or those three that I go back to, but
Yeah,
the one thing I think I'm going to read again this summer or
awesome.
this year.
That's okay. Um, and then of course our famous questions that we ask all of our guests, because our show's all about, one of my core values is authenticity. I could tell you that right now. And which anybody that's listening to me would be like no surprise there.
Love it.
And so we know that sometimes people are thriving and sometimes people are struggling. So in this season of your life, where do you feel the most organized and where do you feel like a little bit of a hot mess?
Yep, I love this question so much. So I would say currently I'm feeling really good in my business. I'm feeling like I've got sort of the systems like at least, set. They're not perfect, obviously, but I've got sort of the basic systems and I've got the flow for where I want to see my business go. So that feels really good. And then the hot mess is honestly with my parenting, which because it's literally my most important job. Like I'm like, so I'm really hard on myself when it comes to being a mom and how I'm showing up. And in that same vein, right, I also believe like there's the different seasons that, and it's coming off of a season where I was very focused on my business, which makes sense. So that's where I'm feeling most organized. So
Mhm.
now moving into a season of, I really want to focus on connection with my kids and building that foundation with them. And like I said, really focusing in on creating that team environment where I'm not the only one doing all the things in the home. I think feeling like a hot mess with like, okay, how do I get them to listen? And actually and not hit each other, like
That's
all the things.
that's the question. That's $1 million question of all parents.
I know. Anybody have the answer? Okay.
Yeah, feel free to DM us if
Yes,
you have
please.
the answer.
Please.
All right. Well, Sarah, this has been so great. I mean, it's been completely life-giving to me, and I'm sure to all of our listeners. Thank you for being a loyal fan of This Organized
Mhm.
Life. I'm super flattered, and I'm so glad to be able to make it full circle and have you on our show. Again, for anybody that's just new tuning in, make sure that you follow us. We're everywhere, This Organized Life podcast. And you can also check out our show notes because we have links to everything that we talked about. Connect up with me on social media. join our Facebook group, whatever. And we're also on YouTube. I always forget we're on YouTube as well, because that's like a newer thing still. So I'm still an old school podcast listener, but follow us if you want to see, hop on over to YouTube and you can watch and listen to us there. So until next week, I'm Lori Palau. Peace out.